everyone, welcome back to Bloom Through Faith. This is Diamond. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for all who have watched my videos previously, and for those who are new, welcome to the channel. Today we have another story time with Diamond, and just to give a brief overview of really what that encompasses before I jump into the book, is that I started this series around the time when I finished my training with Anelda to become a trained death doula, and I'm hoping that through these story times I can provide a little bit of maybe education and also just more of an awareness of, around topics and themes related to death, related to grief, related to loss, cycles, transitions, so that we're able to open up and have more of a conversation about these things, and maybe not so much like avoiding them, or like really moving from a place of these topics being that which are taboos, and just more of just something that can be a topic and normalized, like a normalized subject. So that's my hope, and really this is a space for anyone. And I really chose children's book because I find that they present these topics in more of a matter of fact, in a way where, when there's life or when there's birth, inherently there's death. And so in these books, to me, I've often found that death walks hand in hand. It's walking with the person while they're also experiencing life, and they're experiencing transition in the seasons of life. So, and there's also has been, in a way, these themes have been talked about with a lot of beauty, and the illustrations of the books have been really just warm and just inviting, and really being able to broach these kind of topics. So we're going to jump right into the book. So let's get started. Oh, and if you can, please like and subscribe. The title of this book is called Her Mother's Face by Roddy Doyle, illustrated by Freya Blackwood. There was once this girl, and her name was Siobhan. She lived in a big house in Dublin with her father. It was a great house, full of interesting rooms and corners, full of old magazines and old machines and old toys and teddy bears. Siobhan spent hours and hours exploring the rooms and halls, and she always found something new. She loved the house. Her mother had died when Siobhan was only 3. She had no sisters and no brothers, no uncles or aunts or cousins, and no grandparents. There was just Siobhan and her father. He was a nice man, but he was very quiet and sad, and he kept himself to himself. He read to Siobhan sometimes. He brought her home a new book every Friday. He smiled whenever he saw her looking at him, but he never spoke to her about her mother. In fact, nobody ever spoke to Siobhan about her mother. Siobhan was 10 now, and she could not remember her mother's face. She had searched every corner of the house. She found her mother's old books and a scarf and a pair of mad green shoes, but she never found a photograph. Siobhan could remember her mother's hands, her hands combing Siobhan's hair, her hands peeling an apple, holding the steering wheel, pulling up Siobhan's sock, and her hands on her lap when Siobhan was brought into the dark room to say goodnight by her, to say goodbye to her. When Siobhan closed her eyes, she could see her mother's hands doing these things and other things, but no matter how hard she tried or how long she kept her eyes closed, she couldn't see her mother's face. She could remember her mother's voice, and she could remember some words. Cat and spuds for dinner. Siobhan, how does that sound? Yuck, yuck, cat, or yuck, spuds. Yuck, cat. Okay, we'll have chicken instead. And she could remember her mother singing. Did you ever shove your granny off the bus? She could hear her mother, but she could never see her face. The empty space where her mother's face should have been was like a pain, a giant unhappiness that Siobhan carried with her everywhere. It's interesting because while I'm reading this, I'm noticing that the dad keeps to himself and that he's quiet and that he's sad, and also that he doesn't speak with Siobhan about her mother. So to me, he could still be processing grief, right? Because when we are processing loss, there's no right or wrong time frame. It just is. Some people grieve for a week, 2 weeks, a year, 5 years, 10 years, ongoing, but then the grief, in a way, has different seasons, and it will look different ways for each person. So I'm wondering too if, Siobhan is 10, but she doesn't remember her mother's face, and she remembers her voice and hearing her voice and remembers her hands, but doesn't remember her face. So to me, this is, it's really showing the different ways that people can be sitting with grief and processing grief. And the ways in which also the body holds grief. When she saw other mothers hugging their children or buttoning their coats, and even when she saw her friends' mothers yelling at her friends, the pain grew in her chest and pushed up tears to her eyes. And as she got older, the pain got worse and worse because her mother seemed to be going further and further away. Other children liked Siobhan, but they liked sitting beside her in school. She never argued, and she never whined or grabbed and broke things. She made them laugh. She would cross her eyes and say the things that adults love saying. Money doesn't grow on trees. It's raining cats and dogs. I have eyes in the back of my head. Her friends all knew that Siobhan's mother was dead, but none of them knew how sad she was. She never told them, and she never let them see. When she tried to talk to her father about her mother, his face would fill with worry and sadness, and she'd stop. He hugged her once and said sorry. They had a pizza and watched telly together. It was nice, but they didn't talk. So it's interesting too that when she wanted to talk about her mom and the death of her mom, like her father wasn't ready, and it's like there's an avoidance and sadness there for him. So in a way, Siobhan doesn't really have anyone that can help her process or reprocess, the experiences that she had with her mom, her memories with her mom, the feelings that she's having, the sadness, the emotional sadness that she has to hold on to and has to basically put on this brave face of I'm not sad, everything's fine. And it's not, and to me what's coming up too is that she's not able to actually be herself, and she's not also able to maybe really be present with her childhood and with her friends and with the things happening in school because of all the pain and the pain growing worse as she's getting older. One day, Siobhan was sitting in St. Anne's Park near her house. One day, Siobhan was sitting in St. Anne's Park very near her house. She sat under a huge chestnut tree. She could remember her mother's hands holding her up, high enough to pull a conker from the lowest branch. She could remember the voice. The big one, grab it, yes. She could remember how it felt, the hands squeezing through her coat and dress, the nice safe feeling, knowing that she wouldn't fall. She tried to remember turning to smile at her mother, but she couldn't. This is what Siobhan was doing, trying to remember when she heard a voice. Hello? Siobhan looked and saw a beautiful woman standing beside her. The woman sat down on the grass. Most adults never did this because it was quite mucky and damp. "You're sad, aren't you?" said the beautiful woman. She had dark brown hair like Siobhan and brown eyes, and she had a friendly smile and a lovely voice. Siobhan never spoke to strangers, but this woman didn't seem like a stranger. "Yes," said Siobhan, "I am sad. A bit." "Why?" said the woman. And Siobhan told her. She told her everything about her mother's death and her hands, and about how she could never see her mother's face, and she cried as she spoke, but she didn't mind. She just kept talking. This is beautiful. She's able to really share with someone like what's on her heart and the grief and the sadness and maybe even disappointment and any despair or unfairness that she may be feeling, about growing up without her mother. I think it's really interesting too that they both have the same colored bandana. And it's also really beautiful that she has someone there that is able to hold space and really allows her to be vulnerable and share what's on her heart. The woman listened and smiled. "You know what you should do?" she said to Siobhan. She said when Siobhan had finished talking. "What?" said Siobhan. The woman wiped Siobhan's eyes with the sleeve of her jumper. "You should look in the mirror," said the woman. "Why?" said Siobhan. "Because then you'll see your mother," said the woman. "You'll see the way she looked when she was at your age. And as you get older, you'll see what your mother looked like when she was getting older." Then she kissed Siobhan and hugged her. "How's your daddy?" she said. "He's fine," said Siobhan, "but he's very sad too." "Give him a message for me," said the woman. "Tell him," and she whispered the message into Siobhan's ear, and Siobhan laughed. "Why?" she said. "Just tell him, and then he'll tell you," said the woman, and then she stood up. "Goodbye, Siobhan," said the woman. "We'll meet again, I'm sure." She walked away out of the park. Siobhan went home and went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. At first, all she could see was her own face, but she stayed there looking. And after a few minutes, she began to imagine another girl, very like herself, but not exactly the same. The hair a little different, the mouth a little smaller, the lips a little darker, and she could make her look a little older and a little more, and Siobhan knew, and she was able to imagine her mother's face. She closed her eyes. She could feel her mother's hands holding her up to grab the conker. She turned and she could see her mother's face. If it wasn't clear, it wasn't exact, but it was there in her head. The big one, grab it. Yes! And Siobhan felt happy for the first time since her mother had died, but she forgot all about the beautiful woman's message to her mother. Give me 1 second. Just getting some water. Okay, I'm back. I just wanted to speak now on what this is reminding me. It's reminding me of an exercise that I learned with Anelda that really allowed the person who's dying or someone within their inner circle to really be able to go back to a time that created a lot of ease or a place that was very nourishing, and that just brought beautiful, beautiful memories. And in a way, it was a guided imagery meditation or a guided imagery exercise. And it really allows those individuals to meditate and to really go into a place where they're able to be with their sadness and be able to really, like I said, imagine a place that brings them a lot of ease and a lot of just warmth and beauty. And for me, when Siobhan began to look at herself and imagine her mother, the way that her mother looked, and imagining the woman to be like as a young girl and then a little older and a little older, it was almost a way of her being able to use her imagination as we do within the meditation to reprocess and to really, for herself, be able to have some closure and have some type of remembrance of her mother in that way. Siobhan grew older. From 14 to 15, she looked in the mirror every morning and evening. Everybody noticed and thought that Siobhan was admiring her own beauty. But nobody minded because Siobhan was beautiful. 18, 19, 20, more years passed, and Siobhan now had a little girl of her own called Ellen, Siobhan's mother's name. One day, on the morning of her 30th birthday, Siobhan put on her mother's mad green shoes because it was a special day. Then she went with Ellen to visit her father in the big house. Her father brought Ellen for a walk to St. Anne's. While they were away, Siobhan went upstairs to the bathroom. She looked into the mirror and got a shock. She was looking straight at the beautiful woman she'd met all those years ago in the park. The beautiful woman had been her mother, and now on her birthday, Siobhan looked exactly like her. She cried. That is so beautiful. Because in a way it reminds me of just like how our ancestors and how our loved ones can visit us, right? And it doesn't have to be scary. It can be like in a dream, it can be just maybe by a certain smell that reminds you of them, a certain recipe that then invokes a memory, a certain like music or a certain activity or hobby. And so it's interesting because she went to St. Anne's Park and she was trying to get a branch from the chestnut tree, and then this woman appeared, and she's saying now the woman reminds her of her mother. And it's a beautiful exercise too that Siobhan was able again to really be able to find that closure within, because as we saw, her dad wasn't able to provide that closure, and no one else as of so far besides that woman in the park. She heard the front door slamming, and little Ellen ran into the bathroom. She was holding a conker. She stopped when she saw Siobhan. "Why are you crying, Mammy?" she said. Siobhan picked her up. "Sometimes people cry when they're happy," said Siobhan. "Can I cry as well then?" said Ellen. "Yes, love," said Siobhan. And Siobhan and Ellen cried until they were soaking wet and laughing. Jesus, Siobhan's even wearing her mother's green shoes. Siobhan's father walked into the bathroom. He had heard them crying, and he looked worried. Suddenly, Siobhan remembered her mother's message, the words she had whispered into her ear all those years ago. "Put a feather in your knickers, Dad," she said. Ellen laughed. Her father's face went very pale. "Where did you hear that?" she said. "A beautiful woman told me to tell you," said Siobhan. "Your mother," said her father. "She said it to me whenever she thought I was being too serious. Put a feather in your knickers, Granddad," said Ellen. And he laughed. It was the first time Siobhan had heard him laugh. They went downstairs and made coffee, and Siobhan's father told them all about her mother, Ellen's grandmother. It was beautiful. Yeah, it reminds me too of, I just felt like the father really seemed like he in a way was stuck in time. Again, like that, the pain of losing someone. Sometimes it's like you're able to go through the day-to-day things, but other times, processing it all can feel so heavy, it can feel so dense, and sometimes it feels like so overwhelming, unbearable. Yeah, but it's powerful that Siobhan saying those words that her mother whispered to her when her mother visited her in spirit at the park, that really shook him. And it allowed him to now be able to talk about Siobhan's mother. He told them about how they'd met at a bus stop on Abbey Street. He told them about the first film they'd gone to see together, Revenge of the Killer Snails. She loved it, and he hated it, and she shoved a piece of popcorn up his nose. She told them about their wedding day, how the cake fell off the table when they were trying to cut it. He told them everything. It was dark by the time he stopped talking. He was tired, and he was happy. Siobhan was also very tired and happy, and little Ellen was asleep. And that's the end of the story. Siobhan didn't live happy ever after, but she lived a long, long life, and she was happy a lot of the time. Her father lived enough to see Ellen grow into a woman. And what about Ellen? She's mad and funny and beautiful, and she cycles around Dublin with a big bag of feathers looking for men who look too serious. I love this story. It was too cute. Too cute. And I love this page. The second to last page when it said, and that's the end of the story. And Siobhan didn't live a happy ever after, but she lived a long, long life. And she was happy a lot of the time. Like, to me, that's just so realistic. Like, it's just like, no, it's not going to be, life is not going to be like how we may expect, from watching maybe Disney films or fairy tales about, certain things like working out and these happy ever after, someone came to save us, It's very much showcasing that this is life. This is real life. This is realistic. That not every day, that when we're living life, it's going to always be, we're going to always feel happy. And things are always going to go the way that we want them to go. Can't talk. But things are not going to always go the way we may want them to go. And it may not always turn out the way we had thought it was going to turn out or expected it or assumed that it was going to turn out. But it turns out the way that it turns out, right? And that so much of life has to do with gratitude and knowing that our happiness is in our hands, and also that all things often has to do with what we're able to control, our circle of control, and how we are able to respond, our ability to respond. And it's also just too cute about how her daughter lived, at the end, carrying the bag of feathers and looking for men that took life too serious. This book was just very beautiful and realistic in some ways. And I think, again, it was beautiful that they both were able to get that closure at the end in a way where they were able to really meet each other where they both were and really be able to talk about, their mother. About Siobhan's mother. So, just a really beautiful book. And sometimes I think, and I also feel that sometimes we're not going to have all the answers, right? Sometimes we're not going to always know the why, and people aren't going to transition from this world in a way that we may have wanted or way that we may have expected it to go. But that we can find support, we can lean into support, we can lean into resources, and we can also find ways in which we can give ourselves that closure in the ways that we're grieving our loss and our connection to them, right? Because I feel that oftentimes the grief is coming from like the loss that we feel of no longer having that connection with them, to not be able to reach out, to hug them, to touch them, to tell them we love them. So, yeah. Thank you so much, you all, for watching. I hope that you all enjoyed the book. Please like and subscribe if you would love to listen to and watch more videos like these, Storytimes with Diamond. I really appreciate the support. And yeah, if there's anything that you would like to share, please do. Thank you for watching. Take good care. Bye.